Elias Voss walked his fields before sunrise, the way he had for 30 years, his boots crunching over soil that other men in the valley had stopped respecting long ago. He knelt, pressed his palm flat against the earth, and simply listened. This season, Elias Voss did something no one in the valley had done before. He refused to till. He layered his fields with thick straw mulch, dug shallow keyline trenches along the slopes, and planted old heirloom seed varieties his grandfather once swore by. His neighbor Tomas leaned on the fence, laughing under his breath. "You're burying your crop alive, old man," he said, shaking his head at the strange brown blanket covering Elias Voss's rows. Word spread fast through the valley. Farmers gathered at the feed store, trading jokes about Elias Voss, the stubborn old man planting weeds instead of wheat, wasting a season on tricks nobody's father had taught them. Across the valley, the other farms ran wide open, sprinklers hissing in long silver arcs, deep plowed soil dark and bare beneath a sky that hadn't rained in 3 weeks. The radio forecast crackled through dusty kitchens. A heat dome was building. The driest July in 40 years. No rain expected for at least 6 more weeks. Tomas and the other farmers barely blinked. They kept irrigating harder, draining their wells faster, certain their machines and money would outlast whatever the sky decided to do. Elias Voss only tightened his hat, checked his rain barrels, and spread another layer of mulch by hand, working alone under a sun that already felt like it was warning him. By the second week, the valley's topsoil had begun to crack into a mosaic of dry brown plates, thin fissures spreading like veins across Tomas's neighboring fields. Tomas's corn stalks drooped low at midday, their broad leaves curling inward and yellowing fast at the edges, desperate and defenseless under the relentless, cloudless midsummer heat baking the exposed ground. Beneath Elias Voss's mulch, the soil stayed dark and cool, moisture clinging stubbornly to the roots, hidden from the sun that was punishing everyone else's exposed ground. The heat wave reached its peak. A thermometer nailed to a barn wall read numbers nobody in the valley had ever seen, the air shimmering above the parched, dust-choked road. Tomas's well ran dry entirely, his irrigation pipes hissing empty air, his hands trembling as he stared down into a hole that had never failed him before. Elias Voss crouched at the edge of his field and gently dug his fingers into the earth. Beneath the mulch, the roots were pale, alive, and drinking from soil that still remembered rain. Worried neighbors began gathering at the crossroads, murmuring about ruined harvests and bank loans, glancing uneasily toward Elias Voss's farm, which still, somehow, looked green in the distance. Elias Voss walked his rows slowly, unhurried, checking leaves and stems with the calm of a man who had already done the only thing that mattered, weeks before the sky ever changed. Elias Voss thought of his father's hands, cracked and sunburned, teaching him decades ago that the land forgives patience, but never forgives greed, a lesson the whole valley was now relearning the hard way. Across the valley, entire fields collapsed into brittle brown ruin, stalks snapping under their own weight, dust rising in thin ghostly columns with every gust of wind. On Elias Voss's land, tiny green shoots pushed defiantly through the mulch, unbothered by the heat that had turned everything around them to ash and silence. Curious neighbors began drifting toward Elias Voss's fence line, no longer laughing, just staring at rows of living green crops, surrounded by a valley the color of dry bone. Elias Voss kept a wall of worn hand tools hung neatly in his barn, wooden handles smoothed by decades of use, each one a quiet testament to work no shortcut could replace. Without a single word of pride, Elias Voss simply lifted the mulch at the edge of his row and let his neighbors see the dark, moist soil hidden underneath. From the ridge above the valley, the aerial view told the whole story. Elias Voss's field stood as one square of deep, defiant green sitting in the center of a sea of cracked brown earth. Slowly, the silence in the valley shifted from mockery into something heavier, an unspoken respect nobody wanted to admit out loud, but everyone now clearly felt. Tomas was the first to walk over, hat in hand, asking quietly what exactly Elias Voss had done differently, unable to hide the exhaustion and worry in his voice. Elias Voss didn't gloat. He simply handed Tomas a fistful of dry straw mulch and told him where his grandfather used to gather the old seed varieties. Late one evening, dark clouds finally rolled over the ridge, and the first heavy raindrops struck the parched earth, throwing up small puffs of dust on impact. The whole valley stepped outside into the rain, faces turned upward, hands open, feeling relief after weeks of a sky that had refused to give them anything. Elias Voss stood at his fence line in the downpour, water running off the brim of his hat, watching his healthy field absorb the rain it barely even needed anymore. Harvest day arrived, and Elias Voss's crop stood full and golden, heavy stalks bending gently in the wind, a stark contrast to the thin, patchy yields around him. Tomas and the neighboring farmers walked their own fields quietly, counting stunted ears of corn and shriveled roots, the cost of a season spent trusting machines over the land itself. By contrast, Elias Voss's barn filled steadily with baskets of grain, his weathered hands moving with the same unhurried rhythm he'd kept since the driest days of summer. That autumn, for the first time in memory, farmers from across the valley walked up Elias Voss's dirt road, asking to learn the methods they had once mocked. Elias Voss spread his heirloom seeds across an old wooden table, explaining patiently, without a trace of resentment, how patience and mulch had outlasted panic and irrigation. Elias Voss walked Tomas through his keyline trenches, showing exactly how rainwater had once been guided gently into the soil instead of racing straight off it. The community built small seed-sharing shelves near the feed store, stacked with jars of old heirloom varieties nobody in the valley had bothered to save in years. As the sun set behind the ridge, long golden light spilled across Elias Voss's fields, his silhouette standing still among rows of crops that had refused to die. Elias Voss hung his tools back on their pegs in the barn. Each one returned to its familiar place, the quiet ritual of a day's honest work completed. Children from town began following Elias Voss through the fields, asking questions about mulch, roots, and rain, curious about lessons their own fathers had never taught them. Word of Elias Voss's lone surviving harvest spread beyond the valley's borders, drawing quiet visits from younger farmers, eager to understand what patience could actually accomplish. Elias Voss never once said he told them so. He simply kept walking his land at dawn, palm pressed to the earth, listening the way he always had. In the final light of the season, the valley's cracked brown fields slowly gave way to fresh green cover crops, planted the way Elias Voss had shown them. The camera pulls back over the valley at dusk, Elias Voss walking a quiet dirt path between fields, the land around him finally beginning to heal.